I wondered how long it would take for somebody to... I mean, we filled our boots with Rishi Sunak's absolutely dismal decision to come back early from Normandy. And do you know what happened? Something quite amazing happened. You think sometimes I exaggerate when I tell you how good the callers to this programme are. Much better than the presenter. And on Friday, I think it was Alex in Tooting, wasn't it, who offered up a theory on what had actually happened. We got the question bang on Friday. Just allow me a small pat upon my own head, if you don't mind, which is, of course, famously what happens whenever you happen to walk under a cow. I didn't just say, how angry are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Or how? The question was perfect on Friday because we were speculating about what had happened in the room where it happens. Oh, speaking of which, for really old school LBC fans, long before my time, I had dinner with some lovely Australian friends on Saturday night, and we were talking about Hamilton. That's why it's just jogged my memory, because that song In the Room Where It Happens comes from Hamilton. And they're very good mates with a presenter called Mike Carlton, who many of you will remember from presenting The Breakfast Show on LBC in a previous incarnation. In fact, I suspect Clive Bull was probably around at the time. But and I've now made contact with Mike, who's back in Australia, but who remembers his time at LBC incredibly fondly. So therefore, for a presumably relatively small cohort of my audience, there's a little blast from the past for you. But we asked, what conversations do you think had happened in the room where it happens? In other words, how could the Prime Minister have stumbled into such an obviously crass and potentially catastrophic error? And Alex in Tooting suggested that either he didn't want to be seen with foreign leaders or he didn't prioritise the event that involved foreign leaders. Now, the inimitable Tim Shipman did one of his trademark deep dives in the Sunday Times yesterday. And it turned out Alex was pretty much right. The calculation was that we'd attended the British event, so the international one would not really be that important. And to be honest with you, it's a bit like the closing of an episode of Scooby-Doo now, this conversation. But I think they would have got away with it if it wasn't for that photograph in which David Cameron appeared. I really do. Henry said to us, Henry Riley, who did such extraordinary work last week from Normandy, I know an awful lot of you were both impressed and profoundly moved by it. It's a deep compliments to him for that work. But he pointed out that no one had really clocked Sunak's absence from the ceremony because the British press pack were not covering it with the assiduousness that they had covered the British commemoration, the British ceremony. But then the photograph appeared in which Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, Emmanuel Macron, the French President, and indeed Joe Biden, the President of the United States of America, were all chummily congregated with David Cameron on the edge of the grouping, not Rishi Sunak. And then I'm afraid the alarms went off. Even Cameron, because the other thing we talked about on Friday, and I suspect that some people involved in this story were listening quite closely, because Cameron's people moved incredibly strongly this weekend to stress that he had told Sunak this was a bad idea, and asked why he didn't sort of grab him by the shirt collars and tell him he has to be there. He goes, well, there's only so much I can do, which in David Cameron's case is quite a lot when you consider the state of the country that he has left us with. But there it is. So Alex in Tooting gets caller of the week for last week because he absolutely nailed it. And you know what? Even with my anti-Brexit credentials, we shouldn't really call them that anymore, should we? Even with my pro-reality credentials, the paranoia involved in that kind of decision making, or the petty, lazy jingoism involved in that kind of decision making, I thought was possibly a step too far. I really did. No, don't be silly. They're not actually going to. We haven't become such a desiccated, inward-looking, insular administration that we're actually going to just duck out of something because it's a little bit foreign. And then I remembered the retained EU Law Act, which, of course, was dedicated to removing from our statute books any legislation at all that had origins during our membership of the European Union because it was a little bit foreign. It doesn't matter how good the law was. This was Rees-Mogg's pet project, remember? It doesn't matter how good the law. It could be the best law in the world. It could be your favourite law. It could be the king of the laws. It could be the best law. But if it smelt a bit French, or it kind of looked a bit Polish, or a bit German, then they were going to sling it out there. That's literally what that entire political project was dedicated to. So if we'd stopped to think about it a little bit more, we may have concluded that Alex in Tooting was absolutely right. I'm not going to put you in Idiot's Corner, Bernard, because I can't tell whether or not you are being serious. But Bernard has WhatsApp to say, James, you are plagiarising my theory. Look at my WhatsApp message to LBC at 11:59 on Friday. It was deliberate. Two thoughts, Bernard. I think that Alex in Tooting had made that point before 11:59 on Friday, and there's no earthly way that I can see everyone. In fact, we even did a thing on Friday. We posted the graph of the number of people that started WhatsApping the programme when Rishi Sunak started his apology for not going to the D-Day, International D-Day commemoration, the International D-Day ceremony. And our graph went ballistic. It went absolutely, it went up faster than Liz Truss's graph went down after she announced her budget. So the idea that I would, A, notice your WhatsApp, B, pass it off as my own, and then C, pretend otherwise on the Monday, Bernard, is close to an Idiot's Corner entry. But on this occasion, I will give you the benefit of the doubt. Because I genuinely wondered how long it would take for Nigel Farage to bring Rishi Sunak's ethnicity into it. And I wondered how he would do it. I didn't wonder whether he would do it. I wondered how he would do it. And then I wondered, having been something of a student of Farage's tactics for the last 10 years or so, and then I wondered what backpedal he'd deploy, what obviously and transparently dishonest tactic he would use to pretend that he wasn't bringing Rishi Sunak's ethnicity into it. And then, lo and behold, up he popped, claiming that Rishi Sunak doesn't really care about our culture. He doesn't care about our history. Why not? Well, the bit that's never said out loud, which is why people talk about dog whistles, it's because he's brown. It's because he's of Asian heritage. He's the son of first-generation immigrants. Not even worth a debate on what Nigel Farage meant. But Nigel Farage being Nigel Farage, you then go back to the well to find out what pathetic attempt he'll make to pretend that he wasn't being racist. And the answer is that he was talking about Rishi Sunak's class, you see. He's too rich, apparently, too isolated, if you like, from the experiences of poorer people to fully understand what it is to care about our veterans, which is bad news for King Charles, isn't it? Under Nigel Farage's reading of what qualifies you as someone who cares about our culture, apparently it's the contents of your bank balance. And the richer you are, the less likely you are to care about our culture. So, as I say, as a somewhat, I don't want to say reluctant student, because he's obviously always very good for business, but as a somewhat tired student of Nigel Farage's tactics, you could predict that the racist dog whistle would be deployed, and you could predict without a shadow of a doubt that there would be a subsequent backpedal involving something obviously untrue, which people either mildly or broadly sympathetic to his prejudices and bigotries would pretend was a valid contribution to the debate. Oh, no, I didn't mean his brown skin. Oh, no. I meant he's too rich to care about D-Day veterans, or his class is the problem. And it struck me that I quite like the phrase white privilege, because thanks to David Olusoga and others, a few of you pointing out that Farage had a hissy fit when they tried to close his Coots bank account. So I don't know whether that would somehow exclude him or disqualify him from caring about our culture. Can you really care about our culture if you've got a Coots bank account? I don't know. But a form of cultural racism is probably the best way of describing it. But the inevitability of it happening reminded me of what I have learnt from people like John Amici and David Olusoga, the superb historian. White privilege is an unhelpful phrase because dishonest people can use it to pretend that it means all white people are hugely advantaged, when of course it doesn't. What would you rather be? The son of first-generation Indian immigrants with 700 million quid in a bank, or a white bloke sleeping under Charing Cross Bridge? So, you know, that idea of it being a catch-all term or a blanket is palpably ridiculous, but it's still a helpful term for me, because here's an example of it. I do not know what that feels like. I think sometimes the richer you are, the less exposed to it you are. So I don't know that Rishi Sunak would have been putting up with it all of his life. But this intimation, this sly implication that you're not really British or that you're not really English. We heard it last week. We had a caller almost like from the old days up in Durham telling us that people in Oldham are all foreigners. Regardless of where they were born, they're foreigners. Farage has done it historically with regard to people speaking foreign on trains. And of course, any decent interviewer at that point, as Michelle Hussain did on Radio 4 last week, would point out that his own children speak foreign to their mother. Their language, their mother tongue, their first language is not English. But he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's tooting on the dog whistle. But it struck me that I don't know what that's like. I was reminded of the occasion in the Buckingham Palace garden where the lady in waiting asked too many times a black guest where she was really from. And we talked about that a lot at the time because it was a real clash of generation, that in that the lady in waiting concerned would have had absolutely no idea of the potential offence that she would cause. That's not a defence, that's not an excuse, it's an explanation. And it's one that in a million billion years would never apply to Nigel Farage, who of course was a great fan of Donald Trump, who of course wanted to introduce a Muslim ban to the whole of America. And that's why I thought we'd talk now about what it's like. Just other examples. So we'll park Nigel Farage personally and focus instead upon this, if you like, this middle-class racist trope, this racist dog whistle that is deployed to make you, as someone of colour, feel, well, when you, as someone of colour, know that this person is implying that you're not really British. I want you to tell me how it works. I want you to tell me what the most common depictions are. Oh, you don't really understand our culture. Where are you really from? Those sorts of things I thought might be helpful, just to lest anyone is sincerely or genuinely confused about what Farage was playing at, as opposed to just pretending because of some mild concurrence with his thoughts. So I want to know what that's like. Hit the numbers now and you will get through. 0345 6060 973. It's like integration, isn't it? I don't mind as long as they integrate. And you think, well, here's a bloke who's just been elected mayor of London for the third time. Oh, yeah, I hate him. But back to that call we took from Durham last week. Do you see what I mean? You can't, for some people, you can't integrate enough, can you? You can't. You could be Home Secretary and still be on the receiving end of racist abuse from your own colleagues. I just want to know what examples you would point to first as the proof, if you like, of this quiet dog whistling racism. And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Farage has deployed one of the classics. If you're brown, you can't really understand our culture. God knows what descendant of Huguenot refugees means by that, but well, actually, we all know. What are the other things that you've encountered or that you've experienced in your life that speak to the idea that if you're not white, you're not British? Because that is very much part of the electoral appeal of politicians who've done rather well in the European Union elections over the course of this weekend and in other national European elections. It's like a hierarchy of Britishness, if you like. And there's nothing you can do to change where you are on it.